July 2026 has been a patriotic month for two nations in steep decline. On the 4th of July, America celebrated the Big 250 since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and it did so in typically bombastic fashion. And of course, here in Utah, the occasion for this video, Pioneer Day. 179 years ago, Brigham Young came to the Salt Lake Valley. And yes, I understand that 179 isn't a nice round number like 250, but I take what I can get. I'm here to celebrate by saying that not only are these two nations, Americans and Utah Pioneer Corridor Latter-day Saints, in decline, they are declining for much the same reasons. But I'm also here to say that decline is a choice. We can reject it if we want to. So let's ask the question, why are we declining, and who's we to begin with, and what would it look like to choose to win? Now, I don't think this is too complicated a question when describing America. Everybody agrees it's a nation, and the decline is obvious. The economic and cultural sclerosis is not hard to see, and neither is the fact that vanishing opportunities for young Americans have prevented them from marrying and starting families. But it's harder to talk about Latter-day Saints as a nation in decline, partly because I'm talking about a church as if it was a country, which it's not, sadly, and partly because line go up, right? Well, wrong, and I'll get to that. Because not only are Pioneer Corridor Latter-day Saints a nation, they are a nation that is in decline. The only reason this fact is not obvious is misunderstanding of what a nation is. This is not the same thing as a government, and it's not the same thing as a location where people live. Though until recently, these three concepts mapped onto each other pretty closely, so the confusion is understandable. No, a nation is a people, united by their relationship to a shared founder or lawgiver who forged their unique identity, united by the shared custom and culture that arise from the actions of the lawgiver and the subsequent history of the people, and united by a shared homeland that provides the context for their past and their present. As such, a nation, a people, is an abstraction of the family, the fundamental unit of society from which all other social organization derives. A family is the set of people who descend from the same father or grandfather, and the circumstances and context of this man's life determine their unique family culture and place in the world. The fact that nations are abstracted families is why patriot and patriarch are the same word. It's why George Washington is a founding father. In the case of Americans, they are descended from these founding fathers whose actions created America as a distinct nation. Their work defines what it means to be an American, both in explicit and implicit terms. Of course, all of this only happened because the 13 colonies were far enough away from England for distinct and local culture to develop in the first place, and the fact that this ethnogenesis happened in a piece of land with a massive frontier behind it has shaped everything about the subsequent American history and experience, which is way too big of a scope for this video to discuss any further. Anyway, moving on to Latter-day Saints, whether or not Joseph Smith was a legitimate prophet, he certainly, through the documents he produced and the doctrines he taught, forged Latter-day Saints as an identity, as a people where none had existed before. Those of us who are literally or figuratively descended from the pioneer saints who crossed the plains also have Brigham Young as an equally important founding figure. Sure, maybe his doctrinal contributions are a little bit more interesting, but it is almost entirely at his hands that the Intermountain West as the homeland of the Latter-day Saint people emerged. And now that I've filled out our lawgiver custom homeland triangle, I can say something really controversial. Most members of the church worldwide are not your people. Put your pitchforks away. I'm not saying that because I have anything against them. All that I'm saying is these already abstract bonds of nationhood can only abstract so far. And the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is big enough now that it consists of multiple Latter-day Saint peoples throughout the world. We hold in common Joseph Smith as the lawgiver who forged us as a people, but the other figures in our history are going to be different. Similarly, we share some customs that tie more closely to the religion, such as temple worship, but other customs are going to be different. In fact, in places in the world where the church is young, this process of finding out who the important figures in their history are, what the traditions and customs of their culture are going to be, and where are the significant places that tie this all together, that process may still be ongoing, whereas it's far in the past for us. And that's fine, that's a good thing. And the fact that top-down church suppresses this process is probably why retention and multi-generational family formation struggles so much in many parts of the world, but that's a topic for another time. Anyway, our failure to understand the difference between the religious institution and the people makes us stupid, because it allows us to use statistics or stories about the success of the church in far-flung corners of the world to mask the decline of our own communities. It doesn't matter how many people are being baptized in Africa or wherever if your daughter can't find a good man to take her through the temple, or if the church that has been the seat of worship for generations in your community is going to be torn down and turned into condos. I mean, we have a word for people who take vicarious pleasure in watching the success of others. And once you disentangle the performance of the church as a whole with the performance of our community specifically, the decline should be obvious. We see it in the closure of wards and stakes throughout Utah, especially in older communities, as those neighborhoods are handed over to unsavory foreigners. We can see it in our struggle to pair off and get married, which has led to increasingly tenuous definitions of the word young adult, a problem that President Oaks is very obviously concerned about. And what's important to note about all these problems is that these are the same problems that Americans as a nation are having. You could swap this temple picture with a Gentile wedding and it would be 100% accurate. Similar symptoms suggest similar cause, and in both cases the cause is the destruction of the bonds that tie the nation together. When you lose all this stuff, you just have individual people, lowercase p, floating around, and people don't do well in such conditions. It turns out there's a lot of energy and wealth and worth tied up in these bonds, that they do heavy lifting for us, unnoticed behind the scenes. As an obvious example, pairing off for marriage becomes a lot easier when the long list of things you have to match on with a potential spouse has been shortened up by the fact that you two are on the same page about most of the important questions. Just like the bonds of a molecule or an atom, one way to access the stored energy in the bonds of nationhood is by breaking them. And if you don't care about the long-term well-being of the people, you can actually make a lot of hay in the short term by breaking these bonds. For starters, this gets you things like land and wealth that are now more accessible to outsiders. It also gains you access to the allegiance of the people, which in a one-man, one-vote democracy matters a whole lot. This in turn grants institutional control and political power that might have otherwise been gated behind group membership. Beyond that, there's a bunch of reward to be reaped from these broken bonds that isn't quite so tangible. When people stop meeting their needs through community trust and social ties, you can start selling a transactionalized version of that service back to them. A simple example is to imagine how much money you could make in the moving business if suddenly nobody had an elders quorum. But in the real world, the consequences of this dynamic are far-reaching and destructive. The excerpts on screen right now are from an excellent article by Johan Kurtz describing how the poverty of Gen Z and millennials comes from them being forced to buy with money things that social capital used to deliver for older generations. If young people want to have a good life for their family, they need to buy an entire functional public square and put it in their backyard. This same breaking of bonds allows you to buy the loyalty of clients by taking money from the people who would have been their organic counterparties. All in all, it's not too bad being the guy that breaks the nation, and therefore the incentive to break those bonds both for Americans and Latter-day Saints is enormous, and therefore they are being broken. So what's to be done about any of this? Well, not much at a national level until we fix the problem at smaller scales. For you as an individual, be very, very careful with adopting an outside frame about who your people are or what it means to be part of them. The world's perspective is not going to be seeking the truth, though it may not entirely be a lie, and it is certainly not going to be seeking your well-being. It is entirely optimized to break these bonds and harvest the energy inside them. These ideas about who you are literally built to digest the things that make you you. And these people know that appealing to Jesus or to Joseph Smith or George Washington or President Nelson, to appeal to the Constitution, to appeal to the scriptures, anything that you hold sacred is the way to manipulate you into doing what they want. And I just want to tell you that you don't have to listen to these guys. The fact that you are an American, the fact that you are a Latter-day Saint does not morally obligate you to choose decline. George Washington didn't secure the blessings of liberty for himself and his posterity so that they could become a money piñata for the rest of the world. Jesus did not restore his church through the prophet because he wanted your family dispossessed and your children scattered on the winds of somebody else's doctrine. It's actually okay to be who and what you are. So instead of adopting the world's frame on all of this, what you need is your own frame, so that you know who you are. And I'm not going to tell you what to think here, but I am going to tell you how to know if you're on the right track. For Latter-day Saints, let's take a question like, what did Brigham Young do wrong and why? Obviously there's something. He's not perfect, he's not Jesus. But if the Venn diagram between your answer to what he did wrong and why and the world's answer is just a circle, that's not your answer. You've been mentally colonized. And it's about time to figure this stuff out for yourself. Repeat this exercise for all aspects of the triangle: doctrine, history, your relationship to the land, everything. Now, I'm not saying that you should just uncritically adopt my frame here. It's okay if my answer and your answer are different. And I'm also not saying you should just uncritically adopt the frame that you were taught in primary. No, what I'm saying is that you need your own frame. Self-understanding, like testimony, because it just is the same thing, cannot be done for you by someone else. You cannot live here on borrowed light. And once you have this frame, once you have mentally decolonized, and only then can you choose not to decline. Because to try to stay inside a hostile frame and expect a different outcome makes no sense. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to solve all of your or our problems for you. It won't. All this does is takes you off the sidelines and onto the field. The next step is learning how to play the game, because power and politics is certainly not something you were taught in primary. So if you're in Utah and you want to join us in finding out how this game is played, check out Constitutional Action. I went to the 250 years celebration in American Fork on July 1st, and I'm not even being paid to shill this. I am shilling out of my own free will and choice because this is such an important project. Constitutional Action is guys here in Utah who've chosen to win, who decided that Utah should not decline and that our leadership ought to be held in account for the fact that they seem to be choosing it for us over and over and over again. Because I want another 250 years for this great nation. I want another 179 and more for my people. And most of all, I want you to have a happy Pioneer Day. Happy Pioneer Day, everyone. Thanks for watching.